guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you are new here, welcome. My name is Chris Hong and I'm an artist and I make videos about my art and my art making process. In today's video, I'll be sharing my process for my latest illustration. So for the idea of this piece, I just wanted to honestly simply do a side profile view. That's the only kind of idea that I had in my head when I went to go thumbnail some ideas and create the rest of the composition. And I landed on this one that I really liked with the moon in the back, and I just really liked how the line of the moon, it kind of went along with the line of the action of the character and how the character is like facing to the side. And I don't know, I just really liked the flow of the composition. So I just kind of decided to run with it. And here's me drawing it out onto the watercolor paper that I'll be using to paint. I don't usually like to draw directly onto the painting surface, but this time it went over really well, so I was really pleased with that. I really like how the face turned out. So after I settled on the composition, I went ahead and did some color comps. I did one using markers first, and I liked the colors that I picked for that one. So I did one in acrylics, which is the medium that I'll be using. So I figured that's probably the best way to gauge how I'm going to approach painting this piece. And I liked how that turned out as well. And here's a shot of my acrylic painting palette, the Stay Wet palette. I know it looks rather disgusting. A lot of what you see is just dried up acrylic paint at this point, and there's very little fresh paint on there. I promise I will change it out by the next illustration. So I started out the painting by laying down a wash of a very pale yellow for the moon, because I knew that the moon will be the brightest value in the entire piece. So as I kind of alluded to in the title of the video, or maybe I didn't, I don't know, we'll see. This painting ended up being for me a rather straightforward one, because of the very simple value relationship that I had established in the color comp. Basically, in its essence, this piece is a darker figure against a lighter background. So knowing that and going into the painting with that in mind, it was actually really quite straightforward, and it made the decision making of picking the colors and the values just more predictable for me, which isn't always the case with all of my illustrations. So in terms of the color palette, how I landed on this is I knew I wanted to keep the colors fairly high key, in that I didn't want to go too dark with my values, because I've been really enjoying extracting as much chroma out of my color palette lately, because I realized that if I go too dark, then you lose the saturation of the colors. So if you remember back to my previous illustration that I have a process video of on this channel, in that one I also wanted a nighttime setting out in space, but I didn't want to go the obvious route of making the background too dark, because I wanted to preserve the chroma of the colors. And so this piece as well, I wanted to make sure that the colors didn't get too dark, especially in the sky. So I decided to make the figure backlit against the sky, so that the colors in the sky would be kept very light and more pastel. So basically my mission in this piece was to preserve that luminosity of the moon, because without that, the whole value relationship that I'm trying to set up will fall apart. The moon has to be the brightest and the sky slightly darker against the moon, so that the moon looks bright and light in value, and then the whole figure darker against the entire background. So going back to the value relationship, I know that the figure is overall darker against the background, but I do have some areas within the hair and in the skin, as you'll see later, where the light is kind of bleeding through. And that is because the hair, I'm treating it like a cloud, so it's like a porous kind of material. And with hair already is it's not like a solid mass on top of your head. Light is able to travel through the hair. Because I'm imagining the hair like a cloud, I'm imagining light kind of entering the hair shape, but then getting kind of trapped in it, and then light bouncing all around within the hair and creating that like subsurface scattering effect that you see in skin and any kind of translucent material. So I do have some lighter areas within the hair where I wanted that effect, so that it's not just like a solid, even dark tone against the background. I wanted to add some sense of variety to make it a bit more interesting. And having that in the skin as well, it helps sell the material of the skin so it looks more luminous and believable and true to life. So I'm going back into the background now with a bit of a darker layer for the sky because it looks a little bit too pale, but still trying to be careful as to not go too dark because I want to keep the background fairly light in value to not lose the vibrancy of the colors. So because I went darker in the background, I have to react to that to preserve the value relationship. And to preserve the value relationship, I'm going in to darken the figure. So I'm using acrylics here, basically like watercolors. If I hadn't mentioned that it was acrylics, you probably would have thought it was watercolors. I like to work very thinly at first and slowly build up my opacity as I go, because the more opaque I go, I find the medium gets more difficult to work with. So I try to do most of the like difficult kind of planning out work in this like thin watercolory stage as much as possible. The hair, I really just wanted it to feel very fluffy, like a cloud, and I wanted the hair to be pink overall, so that the local color reads as, oh, like this is pink hair. But knowing me, I love to throw in all the colors of the rainbow, so I wanted the hair to have a lot of colors within the shape. And the thing I realized about painting in this way, where I have like a super clear value relationship figured out, is that I actually didn't really need to go too hard on the rendering, because the figure had to be of a certain value. The values within that character shape had to feel close enough to one another so that it reads cleanly as one big shape. So that kind of forced me to be really subtle and selective with what I chose to bring out in terms of my rendering. And I realized that really there wasn't that much rendering to do. And the rendering that was there to do was very subtle. So just subtly bringing out a few little like curls in the hair, and not by drawing out individual curls or anything like that, but just like indicating the rounding of part of the form. I feel like that is kind of enough to sell the idea that the hair it's really basically like a cloud shape. And yeah, there really wasn't that much rendering left to do on the face, aside from just like making sure the eye feels kind of deeper within the eye socket, so it's like darker. And really, in the end, I would say the most rendering is on the ear, making the ear pop out a little bit, as I really like drawing and painting ears for some reason. So this is how this piece was looking at this point, still in the very early stages, but I really liked how it was looking. I felt like I really had a firm grasp on the value relationship of the piece, and I just really needed to keep reinforcing that as I work to bring a higher level of finish to the picture. I was really careful about bringing in darker values into the moon, but I did so because if I had left the moon, which is like a very large shape, very solidly one color, that would read very flat. And I really wanted to sell the idea that this character is like out in space and there's like a deep sense of atmosphere between the moon and the character, and so I needed to establish a very subtle gradient, dark at the top, and then keeping the bottom of the moon, like the line intersecting the character's face, I try to keep that as bright as possible. So like I am not touching that area. I've already established it through my initial wash, and there's no way I'm going back to touch it, because if I fiddle around with it anymore, then I will lose the luminosity of the white of the paper. But the rest of the moon, I am carefully deepening the values, and I try to indicate some of the subtle some of the moon texture by splashing some paint onto it while it's wet. Again, even though I am creating this subtle gradient against the moon, I'm still keeping in mind that the character has to be darker against the moon, so I'm being very careful not to go too dark. So this picture really was all about maintaining this valley relationship from the get-go to the end. I was very, very committed to this relationship. I mean, I will say it wasn't like a walk in the park all the way through. I had difficult moments and a lot of times when I wasn't sure what to do next, but for my standards, it was still like a very straightforward piece to work on. So that gave me a lot of thought on how to approach my process in future illustrations going forward. So I'm going in with yet another layer over the hair, just bringing out the texture a bit more and adding more colors into it. So in regards to the colors, something that I can kind of point out is that I really like it when colors can kind of stand on their own. I realize I like my work best when I can kind of pick out pools of colors within a shape or something, instead of the colors feeling all kind of mixed into one another. I really like seeing kind of patches of colors as opposed to just like a really evenly blended color. So that's what I was trying to achieve with the hair. I was trying to kind of stitch all these separate kind of oranges and pinks and purples and yellows together in a way that didn't feel too just like carelessly plopped on. And I think part of the reason why I do like using acrylics as opposed to watercolors is that I am able to maintain the chroma of the colors and keep these colors separate, because acrylic is an opaque medium, so that when I'm laying over a color over another color, it is not automatically just like blending and making mud. And that is what I end up doing oftentimes with watercolors, because watercolors just adds on to another, because they're, for the most part, watercolor is translucent. Depends on which pigments you get, but yeah, for the most part it's translucent, so the colors just kind of add on to one another. And because I'm someone who loves using so much color, I just can't help myself. By the end of it, the colors just all end up blending into one another and ends up creating mud. So I found that using acrylics this way has helped me preserve the integrity of the colors longer, so that I'm able to express my color sensibilities more easily. So I decided to add in these kind of squiggly colored outlines around the silhouette of the hair, and maybe that is not worth pointing out to most of you, but for me, I'm not an artist that uses outlines very much in their work, so yeah, it was just something that I decided to try out on a whim, to help make the hair feel more finished, and I ended up liking how it looked. I find that more and more I am looking for ways to treat certain elements in my picture more graphically, as opposed to feeling the need to render everything out in a realistic sense. Because one, I am trying to make it easier on myself, because rendering does take a lot of time and effort. But also, I find that I am starting to appreciate more and more things that are stated in a more kind of graphic and abstract way, as opposed to treating every part of the picture in the same way. So at this point, I am going in with thicker paint now to try and bring the face to a higher level of finish. And I'm concentrating my efforts on this part of the face because this is the focal point of the picture. And I like it when a picture has varying levels of thickness in the way the paint is applied, because I find that that is another way to help just add variety in your picture and help draw your eyes to the focal point. So now it was time to add in the background elements. So first I started by adding stars into the sky, and with the stars I made the shapes to be more of that like iconic 5-point star shape to echo the shape of the like teardrop star, instead of opting for like a more subtle just like dots. And then I thought maybe I could call it done at this point, but the piece still didn't feel quite finished to me. There was a lot of empty space up in the sky. Part of me really just liked how clean it looked, but then another part of me was like, I need more and more and more. And I noticed that in my color comp, I drew 2 clouds, one overlapping the character and one behind the character, against the moon. And I liked that in the color comp, but I really was unsure whether I wanted to add it in the final. I did a mock-up on Photoshop, and even then I really just went back and forth on it. I really wasn't sure because if I don't like how that looks, it would be so difficult to fix it and go over that area to match the values to where they were previously. So I was really scared, but after humming and hawing for a while, I just decided to go ahead and put the clouds in and see how it looks. And in the end, I think I am happy that I put the clouds in. It's just like another layer of just interest to the piece, and having something in front of the character I think is also kind of nice. So at this point, I bring in my color pencils to just touch up some of the drawing and the rendering and add some more colors here and there, punch up the colors here and there, throw some colored outlines here and there, make the clouds look a little less like challah bread, because I feel like they just look like challah bread to me with like the really rounded dome like tops. So just like kind of softening up the rendering in the clouds and adding more colors to echo like all the colors that I used within the hair. And then I decided to draw these like squiggly lines radiating from the moon that is on top of the hat. I don't know why, but I do associate these kinds of like organic squiggly pointy lines with the kind of celestial imagery that like old school kind of sun and moon iconography. I feel like my natural inclination would have been to just draw straight lines, but I opted for these squiggly lines instead. And then I decided that the moon on the hat also needs some stars surrounding it, so I decided to give it some stars, but instead of drawing the like 5-point stars like I did down below, this is when I decided to give it like just little dots for the stars for, you know, variety and also for a sense of scale. And yeah, I think going forward, this is how I'm going to start making these kinds of stars now, because it creates a much more organic and randomized look than me just individually drawing out little dots. Like the size of the dots are also so varied, and the placement, even though I'm just kind of flinging it and I don't have an idea exactly where it's going to land, I feel I like it so much more. And I like the surprise of it more than me trying to plot it out like on my own manually, because I'm not good at making things look very like spontaneous and effortless, because it takes a lot of effort for me, okay? It requires a lot. I feel like I really could have left this piece here, but I decided that the moon is starting to read a little flat, so I very reluctantly brought in some of the like crater like texture, and I was very careful not to be too heavy-handed with it, because again, I want the moon to read as if it's very far away in the background. I think I could have gone a little bit even lighter handed. I'm not totally mad at it, but I think I could have also left it as is. And finally, the last thing that I do with this piece is I go and I give the character light colored eyelashes, or like I lighten up the eyelashes basically, because I'm imagining the light just leaking through and just enveloping the eyelashes and making it look very like luminous and just ethereal. And yeah, that was the idea. And with that, I felt like this piece felt complete. I really like the vibe of the piece. I like how the character's face looks so kind of airbrushy, and I really just find the character's face so precious to me. And when that happens, I end up just loving my piece regardless, because they just feel like my precious little children, my precious little clown children. All that said, this piece is available as a print on my online shop, and I've also made prints of the previous illustration, and that is also available as well. I think they came out beautifully, and I hope you guys like them as much as I do. And just a heads up, I'll be at Emerald City Comic Con next week. I am so excited for it. My table number is H14, and I'm going with my two good friends, Tina, aka I'm a Wonder, and Yana, aka Cosmic Spectrum. So please come say hi to us if you are planning on going to Emerald City Comic Con. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!